Tax season is here, which means you've received or are expecting that tax refund any day now, and you're thinking about what to spend it on. How about a new home? With SaveWithConrad.com, we're helping renters become homeowners every single day, and it's more affordable than you think. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need a huge down payment. In fact, you may not need a down payment at all. At SaveWithConrad.com, we take the stress out of the home buying process. We'll determine your buying power. We'll even help you find a realtor. And unlike the banks, we don't say no. We say not yet, but here's how. So if you're not ready right now, we'll get you on a plan to be ready. Stop throwing your money away, paying someone else's mortgage with your rent, and start the path towards owning your own home today at SaveWithConrad.com. NMLS number 32416, Equal Housing Lender. SaveWithConrad.com.
What's going on, everyone? It's time for the sunsetting edition of Strictly Business.
The wise choice. We're going to be talking a lot more about wise choices for the rest of this day.
I'm John Alba. That's Eric Bischoff. This show has been presented to you by the ad-free shows and podcast heat networks. We are really grateful to have you along with us here one more time on Strictly Business as we wrap this baby up and look towards the future. Eric, it's great to be joined with you here once again today. I've always looked forward to doing this show with you. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. You know, before we hit record, I was kind of giving you the background of my last 4 or 5 days, and it's been insanely hectic, to put it mildly, and nothing really exciting. It's just been travel complication after travel complication. And you know how it is when that happens. It's like you had 2 or 3 things lined up for when you get back, and all of a sudden it takes you 2 days longer to get back, and the fucking dominoes start falling. You know, it's just like, so I had my whole day planned out because I'm leaving town again tonight, and I'm going to be gone for another 3 or 4 days, and I'm home for 2 days, and I'm gone for another 5 days. So it's, my travel schedule's just been insane, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But my point is, I had my whole day planned out. I was going to get everything done that has been backed up on me. I was going to knock some shit out, so when I leave town, I can do it with kind of a clear conscience, because I don't like things hanging in my head that I got to get done. I should have gotten done. So I got up early this morning, had my breakfast planned out on the carnivore diet, you know, and I absolutely love it. And like an idiot, I pick up my phone to see if any messages came in overnight that I needed to be aware of. And boom, I got people's, did you see this? Did you see this? And forwarded me this stupid ass tweet that Tony put out at 4 o'clock in the morning. And by the time I got done with my second cup of coffee, I was fired up. I threw my entire schedule out the window. I said, no, this is too good. We're going to have some fun with this today. And by the end of today, like by midnight tonight, Eastern time, I think most people that follow me on social media, or even Tony, are going to be highly entertained by about what's about to come. It's going to be fun. So yeah.
We will hit on that more later in this episode, and I encourage you to stick around for that. But yeah, Eric, I mean, let's get the business of our business out of the way here first. This is going to be the last episode of Strictly Business for the foreseeable future.
For now. Let's be careful.
Mm-hmm. The primary reason here, just kind of as you explained, you got a lot of travel going on. You got a lot going on in life. You got a young grandkid. You know, I mean, you're really trying to make time for family. And
well, let me give it to you from my perspective,
sure,
because that's part of it. I mean,
I don't want to put words in your mouth. I apologize.
Yeah, the travel is definitely an issue, especially for the next 2 months. My schedule is just so hard, and you've got your shit going on. You've got another life, you know, and between managing my schedule, which is going to be next to impossible over the next 60 days, and then trying to coordinate to make sure whenever I'm available, you're available. It's not like I can pick up the phone and say, hey, John, I know it's 3 o'clock in the, well, maybe if you were Tony Khan, but hey, John, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Let's do an episode of Strictly Business because fuck, I'm in Australia and it's the middle of the day for me and I've got time. It doesn't work. So,
No.
and I don't like doing things half-assed. I had a vision for what I wanted the show to be. And I think we've knocked much of that vision out of the park. I'm very, very, very happy with what we've achieved and the success of the show. I think you know better than I do because you track the numbers, but I think if you look at the audience for Strictly Business, it's probably right up there in some of the top 10, 15 wrestling podcasts out there.
Strictly Business, Eric, is consistently week in, week out, a top 5, top 10 podcast in the wrestling space. It's not even questionable.
So thank you. And it's not about its success or lack thereof. It's primarily about the time, but my vision for the show would have seen me become much more involved in the production side of it. When I say production, I don't mean the physical production. That's pretty easy, obviously. But I really wanted to reach out and tag in some fascinating guests. And we've had a lot of them, mostly thanks to you. You've been the one that has wrangled some of the best guests we've had. And
I appreciate that.
I found them to be very fascinating. But I just wasn't able to execute on my original vision. And then on top of the travel, and here's the main thing. And I want to be completely honest, especially with you, John, because you've been such a great partner on this show.
Thank you.
There comes a time for me where I've got to go, okay, am I managing my resources properly? Because there's only so much time in a day. There's only so much bandwidth in my head creatively in terms of being able to do this type of thing. Where am I maximizing my resources? And as you know, this show typically in the top 5 of what is there, 250 wrestling podcasts out there, whatever it is. It's not about its success or failure, and it's never been about money for me because I've allowed you to take 100% of the ad sales from this show. I've taken nothing from the ad sales. So it's never been about the money. It's been about producing a really quality show that's different than the rest of the podcasts out there. But I've got this issue with resources and time. So I'm probably going to be doing more on YouTube, but in a way that allows me to do them from 3 o'clock in the morning in Australia if I have to,
right?
As opposed to trying to coordinate with guests and your schedule and my schedule. So that's really the reason that I went, you know what, maybe it's time to put a pin in this. And I do want to say put a pin in it. You and I talked briefly yesterday because I was under the gun. I didn't explain this to you the way I'm explaining it right now. But for now, until I can really figure out the best way to manage my resources, I want to do what I think is best for everybody. And I think me being gone so much for the next 8 weeks and leaving it on you and not being able to participate and having not really contributed the way I wanted to contribute initially in terms of bringing in some really unique guests. I just thought, let's just put a pin in it for now. Let me rearrange my landscape in terms of my resources and time and figure it out. So this isn't like, okay, the show's over and done and dead. Eric and John aren't going to be working together. That's not it. This is really about me trying to reconfigure my resources and maximizing them. That's all.
Yeah. Well, and to Eric, like you and I have been doing this show for 2 years now. A lot of people forget that we did basically 8 months of shows just behind the ad-free shows paywall. And I've even tracking the space since then. Podcasting and distribution has changed so much in the past 2 years. And whereas there was such a gold mine to let's do this podcast, that has become such a saturated field. And now it's okay, how can you provide something that is different than, as you always say? And I think taking a step back and evaluating those options is always a good thing you need to do. And I'm greatly appreciative, man. This show wasn't a concept of mine. Pretty much every show I've ever done has been a concept of mine. This show was not. I was told, John, you're going to be hosting a podcast with Eric Bischoff. And I was so excited.
Oh, shit. Unreal bastard.
Part of me was very excited because, I've told you this before, and I've said this publicly many times. I think you're one of the greatest TV performers in the history of wrestling. And even from my indie stuff that I've done, I've watched so much of your stuff because even though I know you personally, your legacy is so entrenched in the business side of things, but I know you too at that molecular level. You're a performer at heart, and you're a great performer. And the idea of getting to do a podcast with you was so exciting to me. But I knew this too going in, Eric, that you are a polarizing figure in the wrestling industry. And I knew that that would be a really exciting challenge because I didn't want to do a podcast that'd be Eric says something and John blindly agrees with him.
Right.
Because what fun is that?
It is zero fun. And that's why I've had so much fun doing this show with you.
Right. And like there are the Cornette types, there are the Russo types where they'll say something really out there about whatever, and then the co-host just blindly agrees with them and haha, screw everyone else, fuck everyone else. This is the right opinion. But I love the discourse that we have, and even when it gets heated, it's so much fun. And I'm really, really appreciative of that opportunity to get a chance to do this show with you. I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
And likewise, John, I get bored as fuck talking to people that agree with me all the time. I love a robust, passionate, I don't want to get to the point where I want to throw furniture or bust shit up, but
came close a few times.
I don't mind. I was just going to say, I don't mind getting close. That's fun to me. That's life. What have I said a million times? There's t-shirts out there. Heat is life, because heat is friction. Heat is energy. And at the end of the day, it's all about energy. And sometimes I'd much rather sit down and have a lively debate, as you would call it, because you have a perspective and opinion. I have a perspective and opinion. We're two different people. We're two different personalities. I think that's far more interesting for a viewer or a listener. And all the feedback that I get is supports that, than someone who just, oh, wow, you're right. Oh yeah. Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, oh my God, that show would have lasted about 2 weeks. I would have.
Right.
One of us would have walked away from it.
Well, and like I said, I take a lot of pride in providing that juxtaposition, and this show has made me a better broadcaster. So much to the point, and this is a straight shoot here. This show got me a gig on a regional sports network in New York City. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for real, like the head of talent at SNY, Brad Como, giving him a shout out right now.
Hey, Brad, you got a good man on your hands.
I appreciate that. Brad is a huge old school wrestling fan, and he loves Strictly Business. And he found it so fascinating and so interesting. And one day he followed me on the platform formerly known as Twitter. We got into a conversation. He didn't even know I had a TV background. He knew me from doing this show with you. So,
awesome.
And I'm so eternally grateful for that, because that allowed me to check off a childhood dream of getting to host a regional sports network, Sports Center style show in New York City about the teams that I grew up loving. I mean, you see them right there behind me. So I'm so grateful for that, Eric. And I can't thank you enough for that. I really do mean that. And,
well, you put it in, I appreciate that, but you put a lot of horsepower behind this, and you've done a great job. I've really enjoyed working with you. And again, I don't want to make this sound like, oh, fuck, we're never going to talk to each other again. We will be doing more things together. It's just a matter of if and what, not if. It's a matter of when and what. So,
when and what, for sure.
Yeah, when and what. That's what it's all about. When and what. What? Sorry.
But we've had a lot of fun stuff, and I tweeted this out right before we started, but I've taken so much pride, Eric, in the amount of interesting people that we've been able to platform with this podcast. And many of whom that you've introduced. Carrie Ann was one of my favorites. Just the sociology of wrestling fans, talking about that. Isaac Riston talking about the music of wrestling.
Grammy Award winning.
We have Mel Coleman on here talking about wrestling art. We had Belts by Dan talking about the production of wrestling belts. Those, to me, those are some of my favorite conversations I've ever had in the podcasting space.
I agree. And like I said, this is not, the end of something. This is just a pause, if you will. Not a sunset, Tony. Not that. But I really love the wise choice reference that Tony made in his ridiculous 4 a.m. tweet.
Got a lot of comments too, Eric, from people in the industry who are upset to see the weekly show go. Matt Cardona reached out, and Matt, I know Matt, that was one of my favorite episodes that we did because you knew Matt as Zack Ryder. You weren't really familiar with what he was doing on the indie scene.
Right.
And when we had that conversation with him afterwards, you were jazzed. You were amped up about what a guy like him was doing to change the wrestling industry. And I just want to give a shout out to people like Matt and anyone else who joined us like that.
Yeah, and like I said, it's been fun for me, and it's been a great learning experience as well. But
Sure.
let's move on. Let's talk about the business of the wrestling business, because I don't want to get weepy.
We certainly can do that. I know you did an episode of 83 Weeks talking about WWE potentially being in its new attitude era. Rocky coming in and just having that segment with Cody where he bludgeoned him and bloodied him had so many people talking. And I'm curious your perspective here, Eric, about this attraction match that we're seeing at WrestleMania Night 1, the tag match between Rock, Roman Reigns, Cody, and Seth Rollins. From that storytelling perspective and what draws audience engagement, it almost feels like that Night 1 match could have easily been Cody versus Rock with the winner going on to face Roman. And
There's probably a lot of things that could have been done.
yeah,
A lot of options, because the way the table has been set, no pun intended, the way the table has been set from a storyline perspective, there's so many different ways one could go. And I don't want to try to give the impression I'm following this thing closely from a creative perspective, because I'm intentionally, not because I'm busy, but intentionally, I'm not thinking about what they're doing as an armchair booker. I'm not doing that, because once I put my producer hat on, the fan has to go sit in a corner and shut the fuck up. And I really want to watch this as a fan. I'll dissect the hell out of it when it's over. But for me personally, when I get too invested, well, why are they doing this? They should be doing this instead of doing that. I mean, if it was me, I would do. That takes me out of the enjoyment mode.
sure.
I feel like I'm working again. But just from where I'm at right now as the fan, because the producer's back in the corner with his mouth shut now. As a fan, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to put my producer hat on for a second. As a fan, I'm thinking, wait a minute. You do this tag, but the tag is going to have implications on what is the most important match of WrestleMania. It just is.
Mhm.
That's where all the focus is. That's the A story, folks. Now there's an A- and a B and a B plus. And a B, there's a lot of stuff there right on the surface, storyline wise, where a plot point could take you in any one direction. But for me, it just seems like this is all, it's like night 2 is going to be a result of night 1. And in that sense, it's episodic. It's episode 1 of your A story is Saturday night and then Sunday. And I love that from a storytelling thread, build, and story anticipation, reality, surprise, and action. Man, it's all right there.
The sunsetting edition of Strictly Business is sponsored, of course, by Blue Chew. Let's talk about sex one more time, gents. Remember the days when you were always ready to go? Well, now you can increase your performance and get that extra confidence in bed. Listen up, it's BlueChew.com. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. The process is so simple, too. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you're going to receive your prescription within just days. The best part, it's all done online, so no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, no waiting in line at the pharmacy, and Blue Chew's tablets are made in the United States and prepared and shipped directly to your door in a discreet package. You never know when opportunity is going to strike. Hell, it might even be at 4 a.m. while you're scrolling Twitter or Twix or X, whatever you want to call it. You fire off a really fiery tweet and you just want to get going. Well, Blue Chew is there in your pocket. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. We got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code WrestleBiz at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code WrestleBiz to receive your first month absolutely free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information, and we thank Blue Chew for all their support of Strictly Business.
Well, and I brought that up on Twitter when this was going on Monday night, where Rock came out and he did that interruption of Cody where he whispered something and I was like, wait, what did he say? The camera cut while he was talking. You couldn't quite fully get what he said. And he just walks back. And then later on in the night, you're paid that off. And I said, man, this is textbook example of what Eric and I have talked about on Strictly Business, with a story threaded throughout your show. Because think about the intrigue that something like that ended up bringing to the table in terms of audience anticipation.
And the conversation. You remember back in
Social
the day,
chatter.
Back in the day, it was called water cooler talk, right?
Mhm.
Because, you'd have a show on prime time and everybody was watching it. It was part of pop culture. And it's what people were talking about when they got to work or to school or whatever they did the next morning, right? That was the buzz. And it's been a while since there's been any real buzz other than within the internet about wrestling as a whole. But the fact that, and that was like a 21 or 22 minute segment. I mean, I watched that show and from beginning till the time I heard it first. Now, Cody front end loaded it. Cody had some dialogue at the beginning before Rock came out. But that whole thing, for however long it lasted, and Rock did not say a word. And what that did, and it reminded me of, not to keep going back to what I've done, but that's part of what the show is about or has been about, is, my perspective today based on successes and failures of my 30 years in the wrestling business. And I readily admit successes and failures, great ideas, big mistakes. I've done them all, Muckerfuthers. I have circled the god dang globe when it comes to that. But it reminded me of who's the third man. It was a question, just like you had. Well, what did he say? What's going on? It's you get people to lean into the story because it's not shoved down their throat.
And he
Their
blue balled.
imagination.
He
Your
blue balled that
imagination-
live audience, Eric, so badly too.
I blue balled that. I love it. But your imagination starts to run wild with it, right? You start trying to figure it out. And you're talking to your friends about it. And I just love it. As a fan, not as a producer, I'm sure there's things we could nitpick if we wanted to, but damn, it's been fun to watch.
So what was fascinating about this was the show started the quarter hour average for the beginning of the show, and that segment specifically was 1.72 million. And by the end of the show, they averaged out at 1.67 million. So hardly a drop come the 11 o'clock hour. There were drops throughout on the quarters, but it came back up for the quarterly average in that final segment viewership to see Cody get his ass kicked there. The show quarter hour average peaked big in the CM Punk, Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins segment. The quarter hour averaged 2.2 million during that, for what I thought, Eric, was one of the most unique segments that I've seen on Monday Night Raw in a long time, where these three guys were given creative liberty to just go out there and essentially riff. And it paid off big time in terms of people being interested in seeing CM Punk in Chicago. There's probably some internet chatter in real time that drove people to turn the channel on, and they did a big number for this quarter hour. You have any thoughts on the creative liberties there being given to the talent to produce something?
It was very
like that?
noticeable to me, and this is not a criticism. This is an observation that'll sound to internet trolls like a criticism, which is pretty much what goes on the internet. But I thought it was clunky.
In a good way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. It was apparent to me within the first 45 seconds, less than a minute, that this was odd. Not good odd, not bad odd, just odd. It was different than. Imagine the fuck out of that. It was different than what we're used to seeing, because what we're used to seeing when it comes to in-ring and backstage promos, which don't even get me started about backstage shit again, please. Or we will be doing another show because we won't have a choice. But it was different than what we were used to seeing. it made me lean in to figure out why am I feeling different about this? And it became apparent pretty quickly that, oh, these guys are riffing. Neither one, none of them were. I'm sure they had bullet points. They knew what they were out there to achieve. But it was like, okay, go. And to be perfectly honest, not all of it hit. There were some fumbles in there. I mean, there were minor fumbles. More, I won't even say fumbles. There was some awkwardness in the interaction, which is what led me to believe, okay, this is not typical WWE, but in a good way. I felt like I was watching live TV as opposed to Disney on Ice in an IMAX theater. So I dug it. I did get a little, about 2/3 of the way through it, I started, my producer hat, just somebody threw it at me and I put it on by mistake. And I started thinking about it. I'm going, man, this is not producing much. There's not a lot of, whatever the intent was, I think they're probably coming up a little short until the end. And it paid off spectacularly. And it was like, Walker Feathers, they got me. They got me. So no, I loved it. And look, hats off to everybody, you know, Punk, Drew, everybody involved in that, Seth, but particularly Punk and Drew, because the whole idea of a confrontation, us intelligently, they didn't put Drew in the ring because that would have almost forced something that couldn't happen, obviously. But number one, you're outside of the ring. So cutting a promo back and forth with somebody when you're 30 feet away from them is a little more challenging. Like when you're face to face, it's a lot easier, 4 or 5 feet apart. It's a lot easier to make it feel real because you're feeling it. But it's like when I used to do promos and I'd be in the ring and somebody be up on a ramp. I hated those things because that distance took the energy away in terms of the ping pong that you do when you're out there with a microphone, battling, so to speak. So number one, the distance between them, and I know that's going to sound like doesn't make sense, but if you're a performer and you've been in that situation, you understand it, you feel it. But bigger than that was we're out here having a debate between two megastars and building tension about whether or not Punk's going to be a referee or a color commentator. I mean, the stakes were a little limp. I wanted to throw them both a Blue Chew digitally because it was kind of flaccid. It just didn't until the end. And then it picked up and it all came together. So, hats off to them. Everybody did a great job because it's hard as a performer. If you don't have something real to see, some real stakes or real issue, real intent. So for Punk to come out there, number one, he's injured, bad situation. To have somebody, making fun of you for being injured, especially when it's true, even more difficult, right? It's harder as a performer. But it all came together. I thought they did a great job, and they deserved the pop that they got.
Well, you know what I really liked about it? The fact that so many pro wrestling promos that happen in front of live crowds are, I say this, now you respond. Then I say this and you respond.
Exactly.
It wasn't that at all. It felt like a conversation where three people were having an argument. And I think clunkiness in wrestling can sometimes be really good. Ironically, I think one of the things that endeared people to CM Punk for so long is that he was kind of unpolished in the ring. He was very clunky and with his movements, and it made him feel more real, like somebody else.
Relatable. He's
relatable, right? Exactly. And I think that paid off pretty well in a segment like this, which was really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, Punk definitely held his own, particularly under the circumstances that I've laid out. I think the awkwardness was probably, and I'm a huge Drew McIntyre fan. Drew, if you hear about this, don't take it the wrong way, brother, because it was hard for Drew too. That's a tough spot for someone like Drew to be in, to try to generate heat in that kind of a promo. I thought Punk handled it pretty well. I thought, Drew probably wish he had a moment or two back to redo again if he could, but I thought it was great.
Yeah, and I think
the whole show was off the charts great.
It was a very good episode, and Drew overall has been doing just exceptional work that has revitalized him and put him in a main event at WrestleMania. So that's a big credit to him. You and I won't really have a chance to talk too much about much more the WrestleMania build, man, but may as well throw it out there now since we did last year. They finally going to pull the trigger here on Roman?
I'm sorry.
Are they finally going to pull the trigger here on Roman losing?
I can't imagine that they won't.
Okay. So you feel this is the time.
I'll be shocked if they don't.
Yeah.
And if they don't, it's because they've come up with a much better plan, but I can't imagine what that would be right now.
I agree with that. There's a lot of discourse, Eric, over the past week that even Rock responded to, where there were some rumors that standards and practices weren't too happy with all the cussing.
That was from Dave Meltzer, right?
And well, so I just thought it was hilarious that he dropped an F-bomb in the final segment of the show just to reinforce what he can do. And that is what it boils down to, I guess, for me watching. It's like you see Rock, you see Punk. These guys are established stars within the vernacular of the program that you're watching. And did you ever feel like in WCW, certain people got away with more things on the TV product just because of their standing within the industry?
Huh. You mean like Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and X-Pac?
I was just waiting to see if you'd say it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's what here's the fun part. Well, it's not fun. Here's the most challenging, one of the most challenging aspects of the wrestling business when it comes to talent. You want fucking racehorses. You want four horses and racehorses. You don't want a slow, comfortable horse. You don't want a pony. You don't want something that an 80-year-old woman could go out and ride around. You want a fucking racehorse. And I used to say this often, try to make a point. I raced horses, had horses for a while. I shouldn't say I raised them, but I've had horses for a long time. And one thing about horses, like if you really ride and you're like I do, go up into the mountains for 4 or 5 days at a time, hunting or whatever it is, you want a horse. And the tough thing about fast, tough horses is it's hard to slow them down. Motherfuckers, they just want to run. And it's a lot easier, though, to slow a fast horse down. It takes training and time. It can be done. But it's a lot easier to slow a fast horse down than it is to speed a slow horse up. If you got a horse that just doesn't want to move, or if it does, you could put that 80-year-old woman on it or a 4-year-old kid, because that horse ain't going anywhere. It's just not. So I would rather have fast horses than slow horses. And the thing about fast horses like Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, X-Pac, Ric Flair, Roddy Piper certainly fell into that category. Randy Savage certainly fell into that category. The tough thing about managing fast horses is the motherfuckers want to run, and sometimes it's hard to slow them down. But they're still fast horses. And if you're in a race, you're going to bet on that fast horse rather than that one dragging that 80-year-old woman's carcass around a fucking mountain somewhere.
It's a good point, Eric. Good point. Another interesting a report here from WrestleVotes, who's always got his ear to the ground on the WWE end. I'm going to read this one. Quote, hearing rumblings of a significant schedule change, I'm told the NXT Battleground event will be moving off May 26th to June 9th, with the location shifting as well, as Savannah, Georgia will no longer host the show. NXT Battleground will now take place live in Las Vegas at the UFC Apex. So a couple notable things here, Eric. WWE moving the NXT show off May 26th, which was the date of Double or Nothing, the AEW pay-per-view in Las Vegas, but then moving it to the UFC Apex. And if you're not familiar with the UFC Apex, it is UFC's essentially their live production facility, their live studio where they hold events in Las Vegas. So, and I got to use the word one more time, synergy here between WWE and UFC. Pretty interesting, isn't that? Using UFC's production facility for a live NXT show.
It is, and it makes perfectly good sense, right? Question though, because I haven't been following that piece of news. I just read recently, maybe yesterday, day before, that AEW is going to be in Vegas in May 26th.
May 20th. So that was the Double or Nothing show, the AEW pay-per-view.
Okay, so that's May 26th. And when is the NXT event in
So
Vegas?
NXT was supposed to be that day, but according to this report, they're going to be moving it to June, and it will be at the UFC Apex.
Okay, so All In will happen first.
No, Double or Nothing will happen.
Dynasty. I'm sorry, double or Nothing. I get them all mixed up.
Dynasty is April 21st. Then Double or Nothing would be May 26th.
Okay, so Double or Nothing's first, and then what about a week later?
June 9th, it says here.
10 days later, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You've got a NXT. I don't think there'll be any impact. I don't think one will really impact
No,
them.
I don't think so.
That's the nice thing about Vegas, dude, is you've got obviously a core wrestling audience that lives in Las Vegas. You've got a good audience there, I'm sure. But you also, every 4 days, you've got a completely different population turning over, looking for shit to do in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes Vegas such a great place to have events like this. So I don't think one will affect the other. It is interesting though, and I agree with you on the synergy %, right?
Even using a UFC production facility to put on a WWE event is very fascinating to me. And
times they are changing, brother.
Well, so let's put another one here. How long until WWE runs an event at the Sphere?
Do you think they've got some connections in Las Vegas?
I think they got a few.
Nick Khan.
Well, not just that, Eric.
Ari Emanuel. Come on, Ari Emanuel, and
not just that, but James Dolan, the owner of the Knicks and Rangers, owns Madison Square Garden, and he's the owner. He's the owner of the Sphere as well, and WWE Madison Square Garden.
I would imagine it. Yeah, obviously there'll probably be some scheduling issues because there's a lot of people that I would think would want to be performing there. Yeah. What do you want to put? Let's put a bet on it, and we'll do a special episode to talk about this.
Are we shaving heads?
No, we're not shaving any heads. Although that would be kind of fun to see you. You're the only person I know that values his hair more than I do, so that'd be kind of fun.
This is Harry award-winning hair. I told you that. GetGoodHead.com. Yeah, man. Did
you say GetGoodHead.com?
That is the organization. Get Good Head. I got great head.
I thought it sounds like a porn site.
Right. Of course it does. Yeah. No, that was the website. GetGoodHead.com. 2018 Harry Award winner for best hair in New England regional news.
Oh God, you could have fun with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I have. Yeah, I'd say honestly, within a year, I think they'll run an event at the Sphere within a year.
This episode of Strictly Business is brought to you by the spring cleaning champions Manscaped. This season, make sure to groom your carpets and the drapes with the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. Clear out the winter bush with Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 and watch your confidence bloom like the springtime flowers. Embrace the season and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our very special offer. Go to manscaped.com, use code WrestleBiz for 20% off and free shipping. Life before Manscaped for a TV personality was very, very annoying. I'm not just talking below the belt. I'm talking above it as well. Here's a true story. I was not allowed to have facial hair on television until very recently. I looked like a baby. I had to keep things smooth. Well, now with Manscaped and the Beard Hedger Pro Kit and every other device that this fantastic product offers, I'm making sure that I'm groomed the right way wherever I want to be. After using Manscaped, I can finally say I've caught the spring fever. Introducing the season's champ, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. Their 5th generation trimmer features 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads, a standard one for taking a little off the top, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. It also features dual LED spotlights to guide you through the darkest winter debris. Navigate with confidence in all those delicate areas. Hate making a mess? Not to worry, this bad boy is waterproof. Shave in the shower, in the bath, or yes, even in the ocean. I love this thing because it comes with a compact case. I can take it with me wherever I go. Spring cleaning doesn't apply just to the nether region, so as I mentioned, get the full grooming experience with Manscaped's signature Beard Hedger Pro Kit and Handyman Electric Face Shaver. Whether you're looking to craft your signature look or even just clean up that neckline, these are always the right tools for the job. I want to help you. Eric Bischoff wants to help you. Here's how. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code WrestleBiz at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code WrestleBiz at manscaped.com. Nothing like a little spring cleaning in your pants.
On the AEW front, Eric, before we get into our main event here, AEW did officially name Kosha Irby the chief operating officer of the company this week. This had been speculated for a couple months now. Kosha had done work with the Alliance of American Football, the old AAF, the Professional Bull Riders, and of course, he was WWE's regional director of live events for a period of time. He's now AEW's COO. So it is fascinating that AEW is the alternative product, but there's increasingly been a lot more WWE names who have come in over the course of the past 6 months.
Did you see that post last week? Somebody put it up on social on Twix. It was a picture, like a poster.
Yes, the
All
WWE
former
talent.
WWE talent that are in it.
Yeah,
It's like 43 of them. I mean, that's so much for being the alternative. That's funny.
Well, talent are going to move. Like, that's going to happen. Talent are going to jump. It happened with WCW, happened with ECW. But from the corporate structure and the executive structure, that's more fascinating to me than even talent jumping.
Yeah, but that makes more sense to me than talent, to be very honest. Yes, talent is going to jump, and they're going to, if there's an opportunity to, lock up a 2 or 3 year deal because Tony's a money mark and he's throwing money out the window, like there's no end to it, which in his case, there might not be. Great if you're talent, I'm happy as hell for the talent, but it's not moving the needle. It hasn't moved the needle. It's not had any positive impact on anything other than Tony's ego. And it makes more sense to me to bring in some of that corporate talent. That's where Tony really, and he's bringing in, and I don't know Mr. Irby at all, never met him, wouldn't recognize him if he walked up to my door and said hello. That being said, I wish him well. I'm sure he's a very qualified individual, given his resume, experience. But that's not Tony's problem. Tony's problem is the product, not the marketing of it and the licensing and merchandising of it. Those are things that need to be addressed, and you want top people doing it. But Tony's hemorrhaging because his product is creatively vapid and is showing no signs of improvement. That's what I find interesting. But if I was Tony, I would want to surround myself with people, because wrestling is such a unique industry. It's different than, and I know Mr. Irby's background. He's got a great foundation because of Mr. Irby's, I call him Mr. because I don't want to fuck up his first name. But that background is going to give him plenty of a strong foundation to be effective if and when there's ever growth. But that growth isn't going to come because you've got a highly qualified person managing and overseeing your licensing. The growth is going to come because you've created demand in your product and in the characters in your show, which manifests in licensing and managing buildings and making smart moves for touring. Because right now AEW has no tour model. They travel around the country in North America producing their live television shows. Nobody's going, you could be the most genius building manager, executive, whatever the title would be, and you're not going to increase interest in the product no matter what you do. The only person that can do that, or people that can do that, are the people associated with the creative, because the talent is there. I mean, there is so much great talent, from the big names to names that deserve to be big names that aren't getting opportunities because creative is so dysfunctional. You've got so many talented people. Some of them must feel like they're in the witness protection program. Their relatives probably think they're lying to them about actually having a job in professional wrestling because you never see them, right? Fix that and then worry about the rest of it. It's like, if you build it, they'll come. But if you don't build it, I don't care how many people you put out there trying, you know, in the front office trying to sell tickets. Ain't gonna sell any tickets.
Well, it's funny.
I could be wrong. What do I know?
It's funny in the post that
I
Tony
was involved in a finger poke of doom. Fuck, I don't have an opinion.
Fair point. Fair point. I did hold you to court that one episode of 83 Weeks we did together about taking the mask off Rey Mysterio back in '99. I just never understood
that was a fuck up.
But it's funny that post that Tony sent towards us, which we're going to talk about in just a couple minutes here. He almost inadvertently confirmed that, at least he feels confident that they're going to have this Warner Brothers Discovery media rights deal coming up here soon. And I'll tell you, Eric, I've been watching the NCAA tournament on Max because I really wanted to see how Max would hold up with the heavy streaming traffic. Because this is kind of the first true experiment with live content streaming on Max in mass scale. And it has been fantastic. The Max platform has held up tremendously. They got 4 games going on at any given moment. And I'd imagine there's a ton of traffic on the platform. So if live streaming of AEW programming, whether it's pay-per-views and Dynamite, if Max is part of that equation, that's a big win for AEW. And I'd imagine that is going to be a precedent for whatever this next media rights deal is, at least on Tony's end.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, you know, again, going back to Tony's 4 a.m. post, you know, probably a great idea to sunset, you know, this fraud. He called me a fraud, you know, which, whatever.
He called the podcast a fraud. He didn't call you a fraud. He called the podcast.
Well, I'm the podcast, right? I mean, you and I are both together, but you know what I mean? Yeah, the podcast is a fraud. Oh, well, and he suggested that, you know, it's a good thing I did that prior to the renewal. I've never bet anybody. I've said many times on this show with you, and probably in one of our shows where we did predictions. I predict, wouldn't be surprised that AEW does resign. Never really debated that. I think there's some issues there. I think some of them have to do with, a lot of them have to do with AEW because they're flatlined. If they were patient, if this was a patient on a hospital bed, they would start calling the family. So,
to be fair, and I just
don't interrupt.
But I have to interrupt you
right.
because you did think that WWE was going to Warner Brothers Discovery.
Well,
for a
that
long
was,
period of time.
Sorry, it was published.
I'm just saying because that would have.
I didn't make that shit up. Had WWE wanted to go to Warner Brothers Discovery, they would have. They took a $5 billion deal from Netflix and said that was a WWE decision, not a Warner Brothers Discovery decision. Warner Brothers Discovery, in my opinion, because I have certain information that is credible, Warner Brothers Discovery wanted to get involved in the bidding process for the acquisition of WWE. So, yeah, it's not that I've ever questioned whether or not Warner Brothers Discovery would be interested in wrestling. Wrestling's fucking hot, and comparatively, it's still to this day much less expensive. Even if it's an amazing rights fees issues, it's still less expensive than producing a drama or a sitcom or other things,
or other live sports
are much higher.
Yeah.
So it's not that. I've often challenged the idea of, you know, one of the things that Dave Meltzer was doing and saying, oh, they're going to get 3 times or whatever the ridiculous rights fees that Dave Meltzer was suggesting that they were going to get back 6 months or a year ago, because he was comparing it to sports rights, which I think is fucking asinine. So I've challenged a lot of that, but I would not be surprised if AEW ends up back there. And I hope that they do, for people that I know there that are making more money than they've ever made in their lives, sitting at home. I hope they do. It's better for them. But I think there's some issues, and I'll still haven't heard much. And like I said to you probably a month ago on this show, let's see what upfronts break. Cable upfronts are in May.
Yeah.
And if AEW is front and center during upfronts, hats off to them. Congratulations. But I'm not I could care less whether AEW gets renewed or not, related to doing this podcast. I mean, it was just very childlike, but we've come to get used to that one.
I'm very curious if AEW starts changing contract structure for talent with these new TV rights whenever they come, the media rights whenever they come, rather than how we've seen them traditionally structure contracts. If maybe things are more personalized per se, maybe not everything's a 3 or a 5 year contract. Maybe there's some 1 year deals. Maybe the way that guarantees are done is changed in an effort to change where cash is allocated. I'm really interested to see
I don't
that.
see it. The cat, look, Tony is not responsible to anyone. If Tony was an employee of somebody who was putting all this money into wrestling, Tony would have been out of a job within 60 days, 6 months tops. But Tony's he's not accountable. He's spending daddy's money. He's spending his inheritance. He didn't have to wait for his dad to die to get the inheritance. His dad said, go enjoy it now. Go do whatever you want to do. So Tony gets to live his 14-year-old Tony Khan dream about being a booker. That's what's going on. There's no financial pressure on Tony that I'm aware of. The only pressure on Tony is can he keep his show on network or on cable television? That's the pressure. And I think Tony's willing to spend however much money Tony needs to spend in order to continue.
Well, I mean, he's shown that with
That's why I
Osprey and
won't be
Mercedes.
surprised. It wouldn't surprise me if he bought his show on. To be honest, I would not be surprised.
Like buying the rights to his own show?
Buying the time to air his show, like a fucking infomercial. It's been tried and it's been done before. It's not like
I know it's been done before. I'd be very surprised about that, because even if Warner Brothers Discovery were to drop out of interest here, I don't see a world in which someone's not interested in the property.
I don't either. And Conrad and I were talking about this. Conrad asked me, a week ago, maybe, or 2 weeks ago, do you think AEW will be around in 5 years? And I said, absolutely. It just may not be around in the form that we see it now, form meaning the distribution, platforms. There may be another way or a different way that you'll be watching it. It may not be on cable television. It may be. We'll find out probably in May. Another month or so, we'll know. 2 months. But I don't think it's ever going to go away because Tony has too much money. Tony can play in this sandbox he's created for as long as he chooses to, because there's no pressure on him there's no financial pressure on him. He doesn't have to perform other than trying to stay on TV.
Well, I guess we may as well talk about it now, Eric. Why don't we? We've teased it enough here. There was a Twix post, as you like to say. Trying to find the exact time that this was put up in the
about 4
early
a.m. based on what everybody else told me.
It was around 4 a.m. or so. In response, here we go. I got the exact time here. It was. Still can't believe this is a real thing. It was at around 4 a.m. Yeah. I posted about us, kind of pivoting here with the show, and to find Tony's exact words so I don't take him out of context, because as you are aware, context is always king. Sunsetting this fraud of a business podcast before the next AEW media deal is a wise choice. Hashtag AEW Dynamite, sent at 3:58 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah, I loved it because I've been struggling with, as I told you, a while ago, a couple of weeks ago, before I made the decision I made yesterday. I'm going to be doing more stuff on YouTube, but I'm trying, okay, how do I do something that can be kind of random and unscheduled because of the challenges my life presents? And what would the topic be? And I want it to be something different than, I've been, kind of wrestling with that a little bit. And then I saw that wise choices comment and it came to me. I immediately reached out to Conrad Thompson and Dave Silva and said, I got it. So tonight, following.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. So tonight, once the ratings came in, I think we're going to go 6 o'clock Eastern with a brand new show on YouTube called Wise Choices. Thank you, Tony Khan. I love it. I absolutely love it. That we're going to have our premiere episode tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern. Wise Choices. All because of that post. God is good, right?
I didn't know about any of this, for the record.
In fact, there's even a graphic, I think.
I'm sure
Oh,
Chris
God.
McDonald made up a graphic. I'm sure. I have
Oh, no,
doubt
that,
about
that graphic was done. I'm going to send it to you right now so you can post it if you want before we say goodbye on this show, because it's kind of funny. Where
Oh,
are
my
we?
goodness.
Where are we?
Goodness gracious. I had no idea that this was even happening, but here we are.
I can't find it. I'll tell you what, I'll post it on social
All
media
right, you post
shortly.
on social.
I got about 60 text messages. You know how group texts are? It's like somebody over here says something, and you don't even know who's saying it.
Curb Your
don't sign their
Enthusiasm
names.
just did a whole episode on that.
So I'm pounding coffee. I had a doctor's appointment this morning. I get my blood work done about twice a year just to make sure everything's working the way it should. And I'm running out the door to go to the doctor for my blood work. And I'm getting like text after text after text. There's like 6 people on this text chain, and I can't tell who's saying what to who. I said, guys, I'm gonna go do what I got to do. I'm gonna do strictly business with Alba, and we're gonna get on the phone and talk about this. But yeah, the graphics been done. We've got a whole live YouTube thing set up where people can get involved in the show. It's nuts, and it all happened because Tony decided at 4 a.m. to call me and you in this show a fraud. I took exception to.
Well, I was
fraudulent about this show.
If I can be very honest, Eric, I was disappointed because I feel, as I kind of hit on at the beginning of this podcast, I at least have done my best to provide a fair rebuttal to pretty much anything you say, good or bad. And it's very important to me in anything I've ever covered. I've covered Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, the NHL. I've been covering Tony Khan before I covered him in wrestling because I covered the Jaguars. And being fair is always something that's been paramount to me. And whenever you've said something that I've vehemently disagreed with about AEW, I always push back in what I feel is a very fair way, to the point where you then roll with it and say, I'm booking from the clouds, like I feel I have been extremely fair, maybe even to a fault. And to have something like that put out there publicly and to say that your work is fraudulent, when you've been trying to do things the right way, it's a very hurtful thing. And I've got thick skin, so it doesn't bother me that much, but it just made me think a lot about kind of the state of this industry. And when people do things from the right intention and how other people perceive that, it was disappointing. It was disappointing, and that's really all I just want to say about that. And it's not going to change how I view or cover AEW. It was disappointing.
Yeah, and I know how you feel. I hope that you don't feel that way for more than another 20 minutes and then just get beyond it, because I honestly don't think Tony Khan was calling you a fraud necessarily, or I think Tony was doing it. He wanted to take a shot at me and refer to me in this show as a fraud, and probably didn't give a damn about you. I will admit that, but I don't think it was really targeted at you. If somebody was making the choice for me to reevaluate my resources and figure out where I want to put my time. But if somebody else was making that decision, I probably would feel differently. But it's like, no, Tony. In fact, there's a whole new show coming your way called Wise Choices. It'll be on YouTube. It won't have an RSS feed. And that's another thing, we talked about why I made this decision. One of the challenging things about this show, from a sales perspective, we've done very well. We've got a great sales team. The show's done a great job. But it's challenging, and this is going to be a little weedy, a little in the weeds for people that are not in the podcast business. But you and I have talked about this from day one. The fact that this show, Strictly Business, and 83 Weeks are on the same RSS feed, meaning both of these shows go into one feed, and that feed is what the sales teams are out there representing. So it's awkward. It's not impossible at all. We've been doing it, clearly. Seen a lot of great advertisers as a result. But it is challenging when you've got 2 shows on one feed.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been talking about this challenge since almost day one. It's also a blessing, because when you're on that feed and you've 83 Weeks already had a substantial list of followers.
Equity.
A lot of equity there. So it's been a benefit, and we recognize that. But you and I, for a year and a half, have been talking about the challenge of the show being on one feed.
Yeah.
So that was another, aspect of making a decision to kind of reevaluate. But I didn't feel the necessity to explain it on the air. But because we're talking about somebody wanting us out of business, this is not we're out of business. This is unlike Tony Khan, who spent his resources and a fortune going to Canada in an 18,000 seat venue, and he couldn't even draw 4,000 people to his A show. And Tony Khan wants to talk about wise choices and this show being fraudulent. Come on. But we're going to talk more about that. We'll have some fun.
Again, it was just, for me personally, it was a little more disappointing because I've taken a lot of pride in being fair, and I've taken a lot of shit from the trolls on the internet for being fair on the show.
A lot of shit for me,
and taking a lot of shit from you. Absolutely,
but it's been fun. It has been, and I've never gotten angry. We've always stayed friendly. We've always looked forward to the next show.
I mean this, Eric. This. When you and I went to do the Fresno Grizzlies game, the game, and you threw out the first pitch, and we did the live event together. It was such a great experience. And I picked you up in a rental car from San Francisco. We drove 3 hours there, did the event, then drove 3 hours back all on the same day. And getting a chance to just learn more about Eric Bischoff, the human. And then I think you learned a lot about me that day too, was really something that I'm going to treasure for a very long time. And, it'll be in my book one day, 45 years from now. Just hearing some of those stories and talking music with you. It was a true joy, and getting a chance to do this show with you has been so meaningful to me professionally and personally, and excited to come up with some other projects to do in the future and keep this train rolling, my friend.
Johnny, we will.
Absolutely.
Trust me, we will.
No doubt about it. This has been a lot of fun. Anything else you want to add, Eric?
No, man, I've got a long list of shit to do, so I'm going to sign off for now. To everybody, thank you again, John. And hey, check out Wise Choices. 83weeks.com on YouTube. You're going to have a blast, I promise.
And thank you to everyone who has tuned into Strictly Business over the course of the past 2 years. So many messages from people all around the industry who are bummed to see this going away as a weekly show. But as Eric said, there's going to be plenty of chances to still get his content that will fit more within the parameters of his schedule. So it's going to be great to see all that. Good luck with all your travel. I know there's a lot coming up, including to Australia. So have a blast with that. Are you going to be in Philly WrestleMania weekend or no?
No, I'm going to be in Vegas. My daughter's running a marathon.
That's right.
And, she's pretty confident she's going to qualify for the Boston Marathon. Right. This is her 7th one, I think, or 8th. So this is the one, and we all wanted to be there for it.
Fingers crossed for her on that. This has been Strictly Business with Eric Bischoff. We'll see you next time.